And we are recording with Dr. Murray Sabrin on your third time on here, I believe, on Monday, June 26th, 2023 at 4:40 p.m. Eastern time. And he just asked me, for anybody watching, you might be wondering, why am I wearing a very thick, heavy winter jacket? And it's because this camera and this computer can only run. I record the podcast on three different software systems at once because you'll never realize just how frustrating it is until an episode doesn't record properly and then you just can't redo it. And so I always have triple redundancy. Long story short, this camera and this computer get absolutely cooking. And so I have to keep this room very, very cold so that I can do consecutive podcasts. But that also means that I get freezing because the air conditioner is, I mean, yeah, I can reach out and touch it. It is freezing in this room. And the last episode I was like shivering and I was like, so yeah, I am wearing a winter jacket in June. It is about 80 degrees outside and it is about 57 degrees in this room. But that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. We're talking about your book, Why the Fed Sucks. And yeah, the takeaway is that they bend over the middle class and the lower class, and that it's a hidden tax. They really don't need to tax you because they can just print more, and it's not a finite resources. They can just crank up the printers, and there's nothing you or I can really do about it. They're appointed. No one really knows a lot of it, how it works. It's very difficult to get a grasp on, and it's a machine that has been trudging on for at least its third iteration for 110 years now, right? 1913. So with that, Dr. Sabrin, how you doing, sir? And
I'm doing great, Tommy. It's great to be back with you again. You should come down here to Southwest Florida, where it's now 89 degrees, and it's just absolutely beautiful.
I don't doubt that it is beautiful. I just wouldn't be able to all of my all of my electronics would shut down and then it would mean I give up. And I don't want to give up. I want to keep fighting these dirty communists. And if that means I gotta do several episodes a day, then I'll do several episodes a day, even at the risk of
Yeah.
dying of hypothermia in June.
No, you're a young guy. You can take it.
I would like to think I can. So, do you think that this book is now more pertinent than ever in kind of because isn't it something like is it a correct is that a correct statistic that like 80% of all US dollars have been printed in the last 3 years?
Yeah, it's amazing. The book came out. In fact, it's coming up to the fourth anniversary in July of 2019, and I wrote it while I was on sabbatical in 2017. And the book was published, as we know, just before COVID hit in the early part of 2020. And from my vantage point, when I made a presentation at Rampo College about the findings of my research, um, the Fed was being blasted by Trump in 2019 for raising interest rates. We were on the verge of another recession in 2020, 2021 before COVID because the Fed realized that all the money it created during the aftermath of the Great Recession was now starting to percolate through the economy, raising prices, raising real estate values, raising wages, and they wanted to dampen the inflation that they saw coming. And so Trump was irate because the Fed was raising interest rates, and supposedly the Fed is independent of politics, but Trump stuck his big nose into the mess. And we know in past cycles, the Fed has always done what the president wanted to do. And a perfect example of that was 1972, when we had wage price controls that Nixon implemented in August of 1971 to stem the 4% inflation back then. And Arthur Burns, the chairman of the Fed, who Nixon knew from the Eisenhower administration back in the 50s, really revved up the money supply. And that gave us the inflation of the early 1970s when wage price controls were lifted. And so that coincided with the rise in the price of oil. And we had a big recession in 73 and 74. And the stock market took a nearly a 50% decline in 73 and 74. So we were going to see the same exact thing in 2020 and 2021, but the Fed started lowering interest rates at the end of 2019. And then when 2020 came around and the economy was locked down initially by Trump and then the governors, the Fed just really put the pedal to the metal, and the money supply increased by, I think, $4 trillion literally overnight. And so that is the reason that the money supply increased. That money supply has been going through the economy for the past several years, raising prices along the way, especially real estate prices, artwork, and the average family has seen their standard of living decline in some cases substantially. Last June, a year ago June, we had a 9% inflation year over year, the highest inflation rate we had since the early 1980s, when the double-digit inflation was winding down. And so this is all like Groundhog Day. It keeps on repeating over and over again. The Fed increases the money supply, we get an unsustainable boom, we get inflation, and then the Fed realizes that it's got to stop the inflation, and it raises interest rates, and the money supply either stops growing or shrinks as it is now. The money supply has been shrinking now for the past 6 months at a very substantial rate. Now, in past episodes, when the money supply shrank, that leads to a pretty deep recession. The thing that's keeping the US economy up now is a lot of government spending, because that money is going through from the government to corporations, to individuals, to families, and that's what's keeping spending up. But we do see some weaknesses unfolding, especially in the manufacturing sector, which is very sensitive to interest rates. So we're seeing, again, the same old song playing over and over again of inflate, boom, leading to bust, and then we'll probably get another cycle of boom once we get through this recession, which officially hasn't begun, but I think it's going to unfold over the next 6 to 12 months. And that's not very good for the Biden administration if Biden is indeed the nominee in 2024, because usually the incumbent party loses big in the presidential election year, like we saw in 2008 when we had the Great Recession. John McCain, the Republican nominee, got slaughtered by Obama in the presidential election. And of course, in 1932, Hoover ran for re-election and got slaughtered by FDR because the economy was in such bad shape from all his bad policies to try to prop up the economy when he did everything wrong that caused the recession to turn into a deep depression. And we had 25% unemployment in 1932. It's very hard to run for re-election as president when the economy is at 25%. In some communities, it was over 30%. But I want to get back to another important point. Most analysts give too much credit to the president for the state of the economy. The economy basically has a life of its own based upon investment, capital formation, innovation. And on top of that, you got federal spending and the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, which distorts the normal operations of the free market. And so because of what happened during the Hoover administration, presidents have owned the economy in terms of whatever is good in the economy, they take credit for, whatever is blame in the economy, their critics take blame them. And so you have a situation where presidents should not be talking about the economy. And that's why those of us who believe in free market economics want the government to stay out of the economy as much as possible. And in this climate, it's very difficult because of $7 trillion of annual spending, which is about 20% of GDP. It's a mind-numbing number, plus these huge deficits and money printing, which of course has slowed down considerably now. So Tommy, nothing will become good of what's happening right now. So we have to take care of our own family needs. That's why I've been recommending that people put some of their assets in gold and silver as a hedge against any financial crisis that may come down the pike. And I think, and I'm going to show this in my Substack column, instead of writing a book about it, I think I might as well get it out over the next few months. I think we're going to have a major financial crisis by the end of this decade in 2029, which will be the 100th anniversary of the beginning of the Depression in 1929. Because when I taught financial history of the United States, I observed something that no one else has observed, namely that there seem to be 100-year cycles in the economy. For example, we had a major economic downturn in 1792. Then 100 years later, 1893, we had the Panic of 1893. And then roughly 100 years later, we had the S&L crisis of 1990-91. We had a panic of 1819, America's first Great Depression. 100 years later, we had the Forgotten Depression of 1920-21. Then 100 years later, it wasn't really a business cycle depression, but we had the implosion in the economy in 2020 because of COVID. Then let's go to 1907, the panic of 1907. 100 years later, the Great Recession of 2007, 2008. So when was the next big downturn? 1929. And then 100 years later is 2029. Now, that's not guaranteed, but all I'm saying is there are some incredible coincidence with these 100-year periods between major economic downturns and future economic downturns. And I forgot one other one, the panic of 1873, the oil crisis of 1974. So this goes on and on throughout American history. And it's amazing that no one else has picked up on it. And so I'll be writing about it on my Substack column at murraysabrin.substack.com, giving some historical background, which I have in my Federal Reserve book, Why the Federal Reserve Sucks. I go into the background of the banking panics of the 19th and early 20th century. And what I did in that book, Tommy, is I went through the testimony of both Greenspan and Bernanke to see what they were saying about the economy when they were testifying twice a year to the Congress, which is required of their required by law that they have to let the Congress know how the economy is doing. And they were totally missing what was going on during the dot-com bubble and during the housing bubble. And so it's just amazing that we just keep on repeating the same thing over and over again. And I think we're in for a rough time in this decade.
Do you think the century patterns, do you think it's hard for that to kind of be overcome because, there's just the human lifespan and the whole, like, I don't know, kick the can down the road until I'm dead? Do you think that's probably why it keeps going? Is like, yeah, I mean, it's such an abstract time period to say, like, let's say it happens in the end of the century, right? It's kind of hard to, morally and ethically, like, we should feel obligated to offset it. But do you think that's part of it, is just keep kicking the can down the road?
Well, here's what's happened historically. Again, that's not a guarantee that it'll happen again. But historically, nations that have run these huge deficits have to borrow a lot of money in order to balance the books. When governments run these huge deficits, most of the time there isn't enough money in savings, so the central bank buys the debt, and that's creating money. That's called monetizing the debt. That's happened in Argentina, Brazil, and other countries around the world. And of course, the most famous one was the German hyperinflation of the early 1920s, where they ran these huge deficits to pay for the reparations that they were forced to pay after World War I. And the central bank was just printing up money like crazy. And of course, before World War I, it took 4 German marks to buy a US dollar. At the height of the German hyperinflation, it took 4 trillion marks to buy a dollar. That's how crazy the hyperinflation was in Germany. We all saw pictures of people with wheelbarrows full of money going to the store to buy groceries, and people were using the German marks to heat their homes because the middle class and low income groups were wiped out. So people were papering their walls with the money in order to keep warm. So it was a total breakdown. Hyperinflation has occurred throughout the world. The last time we had hyperinflation in the United States was basically during the Civil War, where the South was printing up a lot of money to pay for the war. And one economist had defined hyperinflation as 50% or more inflation. And that's exactly what the South had, more than 50% inflation per month. So could you imagine when prices go up 50% each month, not a year, but each month? That means at the end of the year, prices are up by about 1,000% because you get the compounding effect of prices going up. So here's what could happen, not could happen, not will happen, but could happen in the United States. There's no fiscal discipline in Washington. We saw this budget deal, this debt ceiling deal, which doesn't do anything to address the real problem, which is government spending. And so what will happen, or what could happen, is the federal government just keeps on borrowing money year after year after year for the next several years. Foreigners who buy up a good portion of the debt each year will say, no more, we're not going to buy any more debt because we see that the fiscal house of the United States is going down the tubes, and they will refuse to buy it. So then the Federal Reserve will step in and buy up the debt. And depending on how large the debt will be over the next several years, they may create trillions and trillions and trillions of new dollars, which will enter the economy via government spending, and that will raise prices and wages. Of course, prices go up faster than wages. That's why middle income folks get really hurt during an inflation. And we could have a hyperinflation by the end of the decade or sometime in the next decade. No can time this right now, but that's what's on the horizon because there's such an appetite for spending in Washington that even after COVID and all the stimulus money, spending is not going back to its pre-COVID levels. And that's the real problem we have is that what we're seeing now is what's happened in the past. Spending goes up, the crisis is passes, and spending rarely goes down. The only time that's happened big time is right after World War II, where the budget of the federal government went down by 50%. And that was a great boon to the
Yeah.
economy because what that meant was government was not sucking up the resources of the private sector. And we had the great economic
Yeah.
boom of the post-war period. That was the era of the baby boomers. The soldiers came back from World War II. They got married. They created families. Suburbanization sprung up all over the country as people moved out of the cities. Automobile sales took off. Television sales took off. And we had a great economic boom in the 1950s, even though it was punctuated with several mild recessions. But overall, the economy was humming along. And all you have to do is see newsreel pictures of the 1950s and early 1960s. We had relatively low inflation because there was a tremendous productivity boost in the U.S. economy. And so it was really sometimes people will call it sort of the best of times. The federal government, there was no Medicare and Medicaid till 1965. Social Security was a small part of the federal budget. So the only thing the federal government really spent money on, 50% of the budget was devoted to defense spending because of the Cold War. And there weren't all these entitlement programs because the Great Society spending didn't kick in until the second half of the 1960s. And so government was not a big drain on the economy as it is today. And that's one of the reasons the Federal Reserve is very nervous about fiscal policy because they see if the federal government doesn't have any discipline, it will step in, which it shouldn't. It should not step in and enable the federal government to spend all this money. Jerome Powell should say to the public and the members of Congress, our job is to maintain the purchasing power of the dollar, not to create the excess dollars, which of course they create dollars all the time, but not recently. And he should put the Congress on notice. If you don't balance the budget or keep spending intact, we're not going to bail you out by buying up your debt, the Treasury's debt. And he should state that very unequivocally, and that will get their attention. I can tell you that.
Yeah, when you examine all those things, I and I've had this thought for the last 2 years or so. And it's not right, but in terms of what I think will happen, I think they want like a world war because I really do. Like, I don't think it's that absurd to believe. I think they're looking at World War II, the post-war boom, and they're going, "Hey, there's something there." I think I have a bad feeling that's where this is going.
Well, this is what some people are worried about is that our involvement in Ukraine
Yes.
lead to World War III because Putin is not going to let up in terms of Ukraine should not be part of NATO. NATO should be disbanded, just as the Warsaw Pact was disbanded when the Soviet Union collapsed. And so we have, I think, not only a humane obligation, but a moral obligation to not have an alliance that could be a tripwire to World War III, because the NATO pact says that an attack on one NATO country is an
Hmm.
attack on all of us, and that will initiate a war. Now, under our Constitution, the president has to go to Congress to get a declaration of war, which hasn't happened since December 8th, 1941, after Pearl Harbor. And so we've been living basically in a continuous constitutional crisis, not only having these endless wars since World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Middle East, and now a proxy war in Ukraine. But one of the points that no one, Tommy, in Washington or even on podcasts are talking about, I think I'm the only one talking about this, is that we have unconstitutional spending. Article 1, Section 8 outlines the specific spending that is allowed under the Constitution, and you compare that section of the Constitution with the federal budget, there's a major disconnect. And I think it's yesterday, June 25th, 1959, Tommy, I raised my right hand and became a United States citizen, taking the oath to uphold the Constitution. I've been doing that since 1959 as a citizen, as a U.S. Senate candidate in New Jersey, and now as in my post-college teaching career as a guest on podcast radio shows, and making this point very simple. In fact, I was on a New Hampshire radio station this morning, and I asked the host, because he's going to have a lot of the presidential candidates on his show because they have to go up to New Hampshire for the primary
Mm-hmm.
next year. I said, the one question you should ask all of them, Jack, is ask them, how do you justify the federal budget, given that Article 1, Section 8 does not authorize the government to spend money on all these programs? Tell me what you're going to do to make sure we have a constitutional budget. And that is the $64,000 question that no one in Congress that I've seen talk about this on any of the talk shows. No one's writing about it. And I'll continue to write it in my Substack column, because I think that's the issue we have to address, is what is authorized. And of course, we know that the Supreme Court has not been any help in this, because they had their chance to deal with Social Security in the 1930s after it was passed, and there was a lawsuit to challenge Social Security's constitutionality, and Supreme Court punted. They said it can occur, even though there's nothing in the Constitution. The difference between our era and previous eras before the Great Depression, Tommy, is that back then people respected the Constitution. So in 1895, when the Supreme Court ruled that the income tax that was passed and signed by President Grover Cleveland was unconstitutional, then they went to the route of amending the Constitution with the 16th Amendment, which was passed in November 1913. Prohibition. The prohibitionists wanted to ban alcohol. There's no authority in the Constitution to ban alcohol, so we got the 18th Amendment banning alcohol. In other words, the federal government can do something as long as it's in the Constitution, the supreme law of the land. There's nothing in the Constitution that bans the use of any narcotic or anything like that. And so, again, the federal government is acting unconstitutionally with the so-called war on drugs. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. There's nothing in the Constitution that authorizes the government to spending on these programs. However, what the Congress has done and what the Supreme Court has rubber stamped is that there's a clause in the Constitution which basically is an open-ended invitation for presidents and the Congress to spend on anything, the General Welfare Clause, that the preamble to the Constitution says the Constitution, the federal government is to promote the general welfare. Well, that's a pretty ambiguous statement. It doesn't talk about individual welfare. It talks about general welfare. What's the general welfare? Keep us peaceful. That's the general welfare. Make sure we're not invaded. Make sure our borders are secure. And that's the basic role of the federal government, is to keep the peace and make sure that we have friendly relations around the world, instead of trying to saber rattle all over the world, whether it's in the Mideast, whether in the South China Sea, with the Straits of Taiwan, or now in Eastern Europe with Ukraine. So we have a lot of work to cut out for us, Tommy, in order to get back to a constitutional republic, get back to a constitutional federal budget. And there's nothing in the Constitution that authorizes the Federal Reserve either. And so that's another issue that has to be addressed, is where's the authorization to have a central bank that's privately run for all intents and purposes, and stop manipulating interest rates. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, I taught corporate finance for 35 years, and nowhere in the book does it say that interest rates can be or should be 0%, which we had for many, many years because of the Federal Reserve's policy. So again, here's another example of the president, the Supreme Court, and the Congress basically ignoring the Constitution. And that's why we have a $32 trillion debt, a $7 trillion budget, and a printing press by the Federal Reserve, and manipulation of interest rates. But that's the bad news. The good news, and I have to stress this, Tommy, that's the really
I'm
bad
gonna
news.
say, give me some good news, man.
The good news is, let me give you an example. I just looked this up the other day. When I was a kid in the 1950s, color TV came to the marketplace. And a color TV back in the mid 1950s was anywhere between $1,000 and $1,200. Back in the 1950s, in purchasing power today, that's about $12,000, and that was for a not good quality color TV. Now you now for $12,000, you could probably get, I don't know, 100-inch screen TV, but you can get a fabulous HD TV screen for about what, $1,000 in today's money. So that shows you the power of the free market economy.
Yeah.
Once you have a good introduced in the marketplace, in real terms, its price goes down over time. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened with the automobile, but you can make the case that my first car was in 1968, and that was my first mistake in life. I bought a new car in 1968. That was I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And I tell students to really get good value for your money, buy a good 2, 3 year old car, and you'll say, and then invest the rest of the money for the next 40, 50 years, and you'll do extremely well. But the point is, car prices have probably gone up about 12 times since I bought my first car in 1968. But the quality of the cars today are so much better than the cars of 1968, where you didn't have fuel injection, you didn't have a front wheel drive, you didn't have 6 8-speed transmissions, you didn't have navigation systems, you didn't
Safety
have.
glass.
I mean, the cars today are an incredible piece of technology, so much better than the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And the quality is there because the competition, companies realize that if you produce a clunker, you're gonna get bombarded on Kelley Blue Book and Edmunds, which rates the cars, and of course Consumer Reports. So you've got to come out with a product, you've got to test it real well. And cell phone service today, they were hugely expensive when they first came out in the 1990s. Now everyone has a cell phone. I mean, you have low income folks with cell phones all the time. No one hesitates to get a cell phone. And I'm on a laptop now. My older brother bought a laptop, I guess in the 1980s, 90s, and I think he paid $12,000 for one back then. And it was a big clunky piece of equipment. The laptop that I'm on now, I think I paid, I don't know, $2,200 for it a couple of years ago. And it's the quality of the picture, the storage capacity. My first desktop was in 1984. It was $2,000, and it had a 30 megabyte hard drive now, which is nothing,
No.
which is nothing. And a printer, a dot matrix printer, which was noisy and bulky. Today, the printers are double-sided with color, and you can get them for a couple $100. And it's just amazing how these high-tech items have come down. That's the
That's the
really
good
good news
news.
of a market economy, is that over time, these prices come down. And if we had that across the board, if our wages stay the same and prices go down in general 2, 3% a year, our living standard goes up by 2, 3% a year. Instead, the Federal Reserve has this unbelievable concept of a 2% inflation is their target, which means that you've got to manipulate money and credit in order to get to that 2% target. And it's nowhere in the textbooks, nowhere in theory does it say that inflation should be running at 2%. And because in the market economy, prices go down. So the Fed is fighting the market economy. And that's the real shame of what's going on, is that even with the 400 economists, PhD economists at the Federal Reserve, they don't seem to realize that the Federal Reserve is preventing the standard of living from spreading to the masses of the people by keeping prices up. And so this is why we have a lot of work to do to get the message out to people through podcasts like yours and others, that the Federal Reserve is really the enemy of the average family. It keeps prices higher than otherwise would be in a free market. And we're starting to see the economy slow down. Manufacturing indexes are slowing down. They're going negative. And it's just a matter of time before this thing gains speed, I think, over the next 6 months to a year.
In terms of the purchasing power, yeah, I have a I have an 86-inch 4K TV that I think I got for $900.
86-inch?
86, it's ridiculous. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no, I moved into this new apartment. I bought it for myself as a I thought I deserved a treat, and it's insane. But yeah, That was $900, I think, and it
You
wasn't
can get
even.
some you can get some seats and have a movie theater and charge
Well, I
money.
have I've got a huge recliner, and that's why I play video games on it, and it feels like a movie theater. It's wild, but I mean,
86 inch. I couldn't. I didn't realize that.
it's ridiculous. When people walk into this room, they all kind of do a double take, and they're like, "What the hell is that?" And I'm like, "That is my movie theater."
I that's what I paid for a 32-inch TV in 2007.
Yeah, no, and this was last November. Yeah, no, and the price for this thing's already come down in half, and it's. I mean, on this desktop, you're talking about what you had 30 megabytes on your computer. I mean, this iMac from 2021's got 2 terabytes.
Yeah,
And on my desktop, I have 118 terabytes.
unbelievable.
Absurd. And so, I mean, that is the good news is that, there is progress. It's
Oh, there's no
just,
question about it. Yeah,
but I mean, what you said about the war declarations, I mean, yeah, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, global war on terror, now the proxy wars in Ukraine, and I think they're itching for it in Taiwan. Yeah, and then the Federal Reserve and the no authorization of it. It does seem like there was not all at once, not all that you could argue it happened with Kennedy in one day, but I think what we have seen is a very slow and subtle coup,
yeah,
an unconstitutional coup between the Federal Reserve and really, I mean, the rise of the military industrial complex. It does seem like, yeah, they know it's unconstitutional. You and I know it's unconstitutional. They know we know, and we know
yeah.
they know that we know, and there's nothing to do because they have all the tanks. So that's kind of a that's kind of a dark realization that they're very aware that it's unconstitutional. It just seems that, I mean, they're the bully. What are you going to do about it, kind of thing.
Well, what's keeping the economy afloat now is that gasoline prices have come down, which is probably the most sensitive indicator for the average family about inflation. They go to the supermarket, they see prices are up, so they pay another 50 cents, 60 cents. It doesn't affect them. We There's a front page article in the Wall Street Journal today, which is going to get a lot of people's attention. Auto insurance rates across the country are skyrocketing. I mean, really skyrocketing. Here in Florida, because of Hurricane Ian last summer, I called up to get different quotes, and the company that I'm with, I've been with for a long time. In fact, they were bought out by farmers. When I called an agent to get quotes from other companies, she said, "You got the real good rates because companies have jacked up rates in Florida enormously because of the losses associated with Hurricane Ian." And we're seeing that all across the country, tornadoes and fires and storms, whatever. And so automobile policies have gone through. Also, the cost of repairing has gone up. Thefts have gone up in urban areas. And this will continue probably as homeowners insurance because of Ian and these weather events that have taken place. So that's one aspect of the family's budget will be hurt. And food prices are sort of we were at Trader Joe's not too long ago, and my wife said, "Here's this item, and it's up 50 cents." Well, that doesn't sound like much, but it's 10%. It's a
Yeah.
10% increase. So when you see these small incremental increases, even though they're not much in terms of actual money, in terms of percentage, they're pretty substantial. Uh, Utility rates, we're here in Florida, FP&L has been pretty good. Florida Power and Light, they've been pretty good. In fact, I've seen ads on TV where they say they've kept their rates flat now for many, many years because of tremendous efficiency. And of course, if we go to nuclear, that should have a great impact on rates as well, keeping rates down. But all these regulations uh, tend to not always tend to get passed through the consumer, and that's why economic regulations are another tax on the American family. They're another way of jacking up the cost of living because companies try to pass it on to consumers. And I saw the other day the average price of a new vehicle is over $40,000. And so that's hurting a lot of people. Rents are going through the roof in a lot of places in the country. And so for young people, especially today, buying a house, it becomes a real challenge since interest rates have doubled from they were a couple of years ago, from a 3% 30-year mortgage to more than a 6%. So that raises their monthly payments. Plus, they need a down payment as well. And prices have just gone wild, although especially here in Southwest Florida and other very desirable places to live in. In fact, the New Hampshire radio station I was on today, the host was saying that homes at the ocean in New Hampshire starting at $1 million. That's mind-boggling. $1 million years ago was considered a mansion.
Yeah.
Now it's an everyday house in some communities around the country. And it just shows you how inflated everything is.
Yeah.
And look at artwork prices. I mean, 30, 40, $50 million at the car auctions. I like to watch that on Motor Trend over the weekend. You see the car auction
Yeah.
prices, beautiful cars, and the prices. I mean, it's not uncommon to see $1 million cars going off at auction. And it just shows you the amount of money that's in people's pockets all across the country. Again, reflecting the supply of money that has been jacked up over the last few years, and especially the last 20 years. So um, this will continue until we get a major financial crisis, and that's when and that's exactly when countries have to put their fiscal house in order.
Mm.
And unfortunately, it occurs with a lot of pain because unless you're positioned with your assets, and if you don't have any assets, it's you don't have to worry about. But if you have a portfolio of stocks and bonds, um, you may be adversely affected. But the interesting thing about stocks, and this is something that I don't know if the average person knows about this, during a hyperinflation, stocks at the tail end of a hyperinflation do extremely well because what do stocks represent? Claims on assets of companies, and those assets go up in price, land, machinery, equipment,
Oh,
vehicles. And so in the German hyperinflations, the stock market in real terms skyrocketed because people were getting rid of their currency, the mark, and buying stocks. And so that's that could drive stock prices here up as well. But we had the depression, which led to a 90% decline in stock prices from 1929 to 1932, and then prices took off during the 1930s as the Federal Reserve pumped so much money into the economy to try to get the economy out of a depression, which of course didn't work because we still had more than double-digit inflation on the eve of World War II. So printing money is not the solution to the problems of the world, because if printing money was the solution, Venezuela would be a great economy, Zimbabwe would be a great economy,
yeah.
and other third world countries that print up money by the boatload in order to keep their economies afloat. You need to have a cleanse of the economy and get prices back to free market levels. And we have a lot of work to do here to do that. And so it's going to take, I think, a major financial crisis before that happens. So we'll see how this plays out over the next several years. But this year and next year, we should have that recession that I forecast a year and a half ago in a Fortune magazine article and updated it this past March. And the links to it are in my Substack columns that I've been writing. And at the end of the Substack column, I link to those two articles, and they provide some insight about how a recession unfolds and why it occurs in the first place because of Fed policy. And uh, we are at the perfect storm, Tommy, of bad monetary policy, bad economic policy, a lot of regulation. So the Biden administration has done nothing in the 2.5 years it's been in office to get us back to a market economy, a full market economy, because the ideology in Washington on the Democratic side is we got to spend. Now, the Republicans, they like to spend also because the budget doesn't go down when a Republican president is in the White House. That's what the data show.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
fact,
that was that was a point that I'll admit I had no idea about. I read it in your book, and it was yeah, I know the budget tends to, if it ever does plateau, that's under Democratic leadership.
yeah, it's if you look at the years of Obama, the 8 years of Obama, the budget went up very slowly because the Republicans took control of the House in 2010, and they were a check on Obama's spending. And same thing happened in 1994 when the Republicans took control of the Congress. Spending under Clinton was sort of muted in his last term. So again, you can make the case that the best of governance is a Democratic president with a Republican Congress to put the brake on their spending. But Trump spending went through the roof.
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't know who was president during
Yeah,
the
you
Trump,
would have yeah, you
you
would have
would
written them
think
off as a
you
yeah.
would think it was LBJ, a descendant on steroids, because the
Yeah.
way spending went up, it's remarkable how spending went up during the Trump administration. And now spending has reached levels which is nearly $7 trillion a year, which is mind-boggling when you think about it. When Reagan became president 40 years ago, the national debt was less than $1 trillion. Now it's $32 trillion. And I don't have the budget numbers off on the top of my head, but they were nowhere near $7 trillion. They were probably no more than $1 trillion. So we've the debt has skyrocketed in 40 years, in 2 generations, and the budget has skyrocketed. And can anyone really say that the American people are better off because of all the spending and money
No,
printing? Of course not.
no.
So it's the free market that is giving us as good an economy as we can get with all the government spending and money printing that we've had.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the free market and the hard work of individuals which has kept this thing afloat. And yeah, I think it was under I could be wrong, but I vaguely remember being on an airplane and reading, and I think it was under Obama, and it was like the next fiscal year budget, and they're like it's going to be a record-breaking budget of like 1.9 trillion. And that was just two presidents ago.
No, the,
1.9.
no, the budget under Obama, if I recall correctly, looking at the numbers, it was I think 3.5
Oh,
trillion.
then I don't know what the hell I was looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the numbers the other day, and it's just remarkable how COVID just uh, the federal government spending under Trump under COVID was just unbelievable. I mean, this chart looks like a rocket ship. It just went straight up the budget line from 3.8 trillion in Obama's last budget to I think 6 trillion plus under Trump. And that's all stimulus money. That money should have been gone away by now, and the budget should be no more than $4.5 trillion, but instead it's nearly $7 trillion, which means that the Biden administration is spending money hand over fist for no apparent reason other than their ideology says we got to spend money on the environment, we got to spend money on green initiatives and more entitlements. And we know that Social Security and Medicare spending Medicaid spending has gone through the roof as well as more baby boomers are retiring. And so there's no simple solution to this, but I've offered them in my Substack column of how we can phase out Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security and allow young people like yourself and your peers to save for your own retirement, both for income and for health care. And if we start that process, which by the way, I advocated nearly 30 years ago in my Tax Free 2000 book, which would have made the 21st century really it's sort of a Jeffersonian America where we would have really limited government and and none of these mega government programs. So that opportunity was lost, but we still keep on plugging away and advocating these policies that would be beneficial to everyone in the country, and we would close the wealth gap in this country because as the primary beneficiaries of the Federal Reserve policy, as I point out in my book, is the one percenters, the 5 percenters who own most of the stock, most of the real estate, most of the artwork that gets inflated over a cycle.
Yeah, I mean, there is some genius behind the evilness of it.
Oh
It's
yeah.
kind of like who wields the military. You kind of control everything. Like, what are you know, you print more money to build a bigger military, and then who the hell is going to stop you? You got to have a military to stop the military, and it does seem like it's a parasite, and it's going to just keep jumping from war to war to war to war. And it's almost like the bully has gotten too big to where I don't even know if right because the bully stops when he catches a black eye, but I don't think there's anyone who can give the U.S. a black eye, and it seems like we're just going to keep running this train until we go off the tracks.
Well, the danger we know is with U.S. military bases in Eastern Europe and in
Yeah,
Western Europe, with military bases in the South Pacific and Japan, Korea, and Southeast Asia. This is a tripwire. This is how you get involved in wars: is that you have some event that takes place, and then it leads to more fighting, more shooting, and then it escalates. And so this is the danger of having troops and bases all around the world and now, of course, the Chinese are in Cuba, just as we are in bases surrounding China. And in 1962, when Kennedy found out there were missiles in Cuba, it nearly led to World War III. And I remember that vividly. I was a high school student when that happened. Tommy, and we came very close to a nuclear exchange with the Soviet Union because there were missiles in Cuba. And so, if China puts missiles in Cuba, uh, which is a real possibility, but the Chinese know history as well as anybody that the U.S. president almost came to blows with the Soviet Union because of the missiles in Cuba. I don't think they would be that reckless. I can't see them being that provocative. But then again, we have missiles all around China.
Yeah.
Um, I just saw the other day we have 120 bases in Japan. I mean,
You
World War II has been over for 77 years.
I'm gonna text you a book right now called Base Nation by
Hmm.
David Vine. And I had him on the show a little over 2 years ago. But it was about that book, and it's to this day, it's one of my favorite books. I'm gonna text it to you right now. But it's
Okay.
yeah, it's a tripwire, and then you start to think, yeah, by design, it's a tripwire. They know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing, and I don't I can't despair because I feel like despair is a slow form of suicide.
Oh yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
I have to stay positive, and a lot of it does come down to just personal things like, can I go to the gym more? Can I keep my apartment clean? Can I read books? Can I go visit my parents? Can I be a good friend? And sometimes you do have to do that and not totally give in to the because I mean what we're talking about are these like hyper scale institutions, the
Oh
Federal Reserve and the military industrial complex. I mean, we're essentially talking about gods fighting, right? And but man, it's easy to slip into despair when you're like, what is there to do? And I don't know if I have the answer.
well, this is why a lot of people are saying, "Hey, I can't change the Federal Reserve. I can't change the structure of the federal government. So I'm going to be as productive as I can, earn as much money as I can, and enjoy my life and try to not get caught in this web
Yeah.
of, that the big government has cast around the U.S. economy. And I think for a lot of people, that's what they're doing. They're homeschooling their kids so they don't have to deal with the craziness that's going on in the public schools. A lot of families are just going and getting off the grid if they want to do
Hmm.
that. And there are people that are just living their life and just taking in the best that they can have in their environments. They still go traveling. I mean, from what we've been reading, the airlines are booked solid. The cruise lines are getting more and more customers after COVID. So people want to enjoy their life. They want to travel. They want to be entertained. They're going to concerts and so on and so forth. So again, for the average person, they see prices go up, so they're making adjustments to their income. They may go get a second job if necessary, if they don't have a high income from their first job. So people make adjustments. That's the beauty of human beings. People are flexible, and despair is not something I ever dealt with because if people read my memoir, From Immigrant to Public Intellectual, there are times that in my life where I could have gone into a deep depression because
Hmm.
of things that were happening to me, but I didn't because I generally was an optimistic kid and had a positive mental attitude. And if you do that, you can get through life without much difficulty. But things for some people can get very tough, and that's why sometimes that's why I've met a lot of people that don't watch the news anymore.
Oh, you can't. You got to
They,
unplug.
they just cannot take the negativity that's out there with the crime, with the fires, with what goes on in Washington, and so people say, I just can't watch this anymore. It's no good for my psyche. It's no good for my psychological balance. And so they just watch some inane TV, or they don't watch any TV at all. They just read a book or go take a walk, whatever the case. We go to the gym, work off some energy that way. And so again, we all have choices to make, and hopefully we make choices that improve our uh, lives, either mentally or emotionally or psychologically and materially, and that's what it's all about, to have that nice balance in life. And if you do that, then what the government does, what the Federal Reserve does, will not give you that despair that easily people can fall into because of what's happening around them.
No, beautifully said. And that is something you have to do is just, and I always have to remain optimistic, and I do. And I try to look at it as like, the negativity of all of this might not be totally worthless. It might force you to I mean, like competition, right? You got to put out a better car.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a form of a workout of, you got to stay. For me, like I can't go a day without the gym. I can't go a day without a good night's sleep or a
Mm.
walk and getting some sunshine on my face. It almost forces you to be better when things can seem so dark. It almost forces you to fine hone your positivity, fine hone your optimism.
Yeah. What I'm looking forward to see how long we can stay afloat is what you see in third world countries when the economy really turns bad is that you get blackouts, the utilities,
Mm.
some reason can't make it. You get the interruption in cell service. You may get interruption in that. But as long as there's gasoline at the gas station, the stores are relatively stocked with goods and services. We saw what happened during the supply chain disruption because of COVID. Things were in short supply, or people were waiting months and months for furniture and other things from overseas. As long as people feel that they can use their dollars that they earn to buy things that they want, people will not complain too much because it's an opportunity cost, Tommy, and the government knows that. People know that. It's very hard to go to Washington to demonstrate against the government. You can go down to your city hall and complain. You can go to the county government. You can go to maybe your state capital if it's not that far away. And so people would rather not do that because it takes time, effort, and resources to to uh, to complain in
Yes.
person. And so you can call up your congressman or your council person. You can write the governor. During the first oil crisis, I wrote Nixon a letter in the White House saying, "Get rid of these controls because you're hurting the economy." I never heard back, but the point is, I was so outraged because I was commuting 45 miles each way to graduate school from New York City to New Brunswick, New Jersey at Rutgers. And so I was spending a lot of time in the gas lines, getting up
Yeah.
6 o'clock in the morning because you had the odd
Yeah.
even.
Odd even. Yeah.
I mean, that is insane. That shows you a breakdown of the free market because of the government, not because of the free market, because of government intervention. So whenever you have people lining up like you did in the old Soviet Union, it shows you how government intervention makes goods and services unavailable to the average person at a reasonable price. And so those of us who experienced the odd even in 73, 74, and then again in 79 with the second oil shock, this was a real problem because of government control of the energy market. And that's why we should get rid of the Department of Energy. It's an $80 billion boondoggle or thereabouts. Maybe it's $100 billion these days. They don't produce any energy. The oil companies and the natural gas companies and other resource companies produce the energy that we need. Just get the government out of that area, get the government out of education, and starting to downsize the budget to a constitutional level would be a real boon to the economy. And unfortunately, the people in Washington don't see it that way, and that's why I will keep on writing and speaking and trying to get the message out to as many Americans as possible that there is a better way than the way the economy is structured right now.
Dr. Sabrin. And for everybody listening, if you go to the description, I checked earlier during our podcast. Your Substack is linked in the description. Um,
Great.
I would love to have you back on here, man. You're always a ball of fire. I'd love to have you back on, and we can text about this. I'd like to hear you come on and talk about nuclear energy. I feel like you could do an hour on nuclear energy.
Well, I haven't really done a lot of research. I'm not the best person for nuclear
Yeah,
energy.
I know. That's why I'm throwing it out there, unless it's a challenge. I feel like if anyone could tackle it, it'd be you.
Yeah, I mean, one
If
area
you
that
want.
one area that I think is really terrific to talk about is this whole concept of climate change. I
Oh,
think to me
sure.
that's fascinating. The best website there is, as far as I'm concerned, and I met the one of the founders of the website, is the CO2coalition.org.
I had
To
on Dr.
Happer,
Right. No, no, Rightstone, I think. One of the
Okay.
guys from there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wonderful website. They just have a ton of information. That information has to get to the public to show that what's going on in the climate is not based on science. It's based upon mythology and a false narrative.
And
And the
money.
other is on healthcare. I mean, to me, this is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. It's a $4 trillion sector of the economy that we could reduce by by I think 50% if we had a free market medical care system in this country, which would free up $2 trillion for the American people to enjoy in other areas for investment purposes, for savings for their future. And I think it would be a great thing if we can restructure the healthcare system. And it wouldn't take a lot to do that. So we could explore that
I'd love
again
to.
because, and then of course we can talk about the presidential campaign for 2024. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see how that unfolds, given that RFK Jr. is making some headway in the Democratic
He-
primary.
He's
I
coming
think
in swinging.
I think this is one of the most exciting things happening in American politics in a long, long time because he comes from obviously one of the iconic families in American
Dynasty.
politics, and he's talking truth to power about the
He's
healthcare
talking
system.
truth. Well, not just that, man. He's talking truth. He's not mincing any words when he says the Central Intelligence Agency killed my father and my uncle. He's not. When I saw him say that on an interview, I was like, oh, he's not dancing around anything. He's coming in there full Irish, full Irish anger.
Well, the thing is, once you have the facts, Tommy, it's very hard for people to argue against you
Well,
because once you have the facts,
it's
and
the truth.
you can demonstrate what happened. And the thing that is really astonishing, and Trump really blew this when he should have released the Kennedy assassination
Yeah.
records, which are long overdue. And he was snookered on that by Pompeo, the head of the CIA. And so Trump should have shown his statement and said, no, the Kennedy assassination was nearly 60 years ago. The American people have the right to know what happened. So release all the records and let the chips fall where they may. All the people around the Kennedy assassination are now dead. They're deceased. They're long gone. Let's find out the truth. And one of the best books on this is James Douglas's book. Um, uh, what's it called? The Kennedy, why he died and why it matters, something to that effect. James Douglas on the Kennedy assassination. It is fully documented with, I think, more than 500 footnotes. It's again, we're coming up to the 60th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination, and so many great books have been written about this, articles, podcasts of people who have investigated on their own over the decades, and the evidence I think is pretty conclusive that Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill President Kennedy, and there's really no evidence for that, and so we got to get the truth out to the vast majority of the American people because we got to know what the government is doing, and that's why we shouldn't have any government secrets. They should tell us exactly what they're doing with our tax dollars.
Beautifully said. And I'd say up there with those Kennedy books is The Ghost by Jefferson Morley.
Yes.
That one gets pretty dark about the CIA and James G. Sangleton. But Dr. Sabrin, if you could please shoot me a text as a reminder, and we'll schedule the next one. I think a healthcare episode would be cool. I think a climate change episode would be cool. Yeah, man, I love talking to you. You're a ball of fire. You're intimidatingly intelligent.
Well, thanks, Tommy. It's great to be with you. And I don't know, maybe one day we'll take a trip to Maine during the summer and just get away from the heat here in Southwest Florida. It's in the 90s every day, but we do our exercises in the morning, either in the gym or take a walk outdoors and get some nice fresh air, much better than northern New Jersey where we lived for so many
Oh,
decades.
come up to New England. It's the promised land. It is the
Yeah, well,
promised
the
land.
summertime, that's why people leave Florida and the South and go up to New England because it's really comfortable up there.
You can't beat it, man. You can't beat it. And guys, please go into the description. Please go grab his books. Please go support the good man. And yeah, dude, I look forward to talking to you.
Great to be with you, Tommy. Thanks again.
You too. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your time.